In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read ancient tomes, the order of the Abercast. We are the brave and bold.
The Ages begins with the shocking story of Cain and Abel and the journey of violence and revenge spanning thousands of years, following Cain through his cursed life from an ancient invasion of malicious angels to the American Revolutionary War. A masterful, compelling journey through time, The Ages delves deep into arcane knowledge, myth, and legend. The art is stunning, and the story takes you on a journey where mortals, immortals, angels, and demons are all forced to deal with the folly that is God's creation. It's a beautifully dark and gritty ride through history. This 4-part story follows the astrological procession of the ages and how each 2,500-year age parallels major changes in the development of Earth's inhabitants. Cain's blasphemous struggle with the divine and sacred tyrant God will create and crumble empires, shape history, and cause a cosmic cataclysm.
No problem. I mean, if you just want to do a free flow show and see where it takes us, that's no problem either.
All right, cool. So, are we ready to roll then?
So, yeah, whenever you want to start, I'm good to go.
All right, cool.
The Abercast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. Violence.
Hey, check out our latest graphic novel, The Djinn Jihad. The Djinn Jihad kicks your face with myths, mysteries, epic battles, suicide bombers, quirky characters, and divine power armor. An ancient organization called the Dar El-Harb bring and release an indestructible Djinn. A quirky group of heroes called the Non-Standard Assembly spring into action. What follows is an all-out war joined by a group of archangels. Think of it kind of as like a huge indie summer crossover event. The Djinn Jihad by John Towers, available on Amazon. www.stigmatastudios.com. On the phone with me here today, I have Robert Sullivan IV. He's a brilliant guy. He's a Mason, a lawyer, a writer, and a historian. He's written 2 books, I think I know of, Cinema Symbolism, a guide to the esoteric imagery in popular movies, and the Royal Arch of Enoch, which is all about the Masons. Robert likes to break down movies, and he likes to find the Gnostic, occult, and other magic codes embedded within. Robert, how you doing?
Hey, John, how are you? Thanks for having me on your show. It's much appreciated, and I look forward to being on. I look forward to the conversation, and thank you again.
Yeah, man. Thank you. So I was saying earlier, like, the kind of stuff that you do is right up my alley, because my relationship and how I kind of view reality is pretty fluid. So, like, I see codes and synchronicities pretty much everywhere. At the end of my last episode, I was explaining to a friend of mine about the communist messages that are drilled into children's, or they were drilled into children's cartoons when I was growing up, like Voltron and the Smurfs.
Yeah, right, sure. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Smurfs. The Smurfs is something I actually I talk about in Cinema Symbolism, which is my second book. Both you're right. I'm the author of two books, The Royal Arch of Enoch and Cinema Symbolism. They are out right now. I'm working on two other books, Cinema Symbolism 2, which is actually complete, and my first work of fiction. But anyway, getting back to the Smurfs, yeah, absolutely. The Smurfs are sort of this perfected communist society, socialist society. This is something I touch on in Cinema Symbolism. It's funny. This is a very popular subject matter. I get asked about this all the time. In fact, so much so that I'm talking about it. I'm revisiting in Cinema Symbolism too. But no, I mean, just real quick. I mean, yeah, you have all the Smurfs. They all dress alike. They all look alike. They all live, in the same sort of little hovels, the mushroom hovels. You have Papa Smurf, who is obviously a takeoff from Karl Marx. You know, the white beard and the red. You know, I mean, he's in the red of the communists. Right. I like the fact that he has on the red Phrygian cap of the sans culottes of the French Revolution. Those are sort of the proto-Marxists. So yeah, I mean, you know, when it comes to the Smurfs, I mean, all the Smurfs, they all, you know, work without pay. They live rent-free. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to the Smurfs, you're definitely dealing with a lot of political, socio-communist undertones.
Yeah, it comes from that Pietro was a Frenchman, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right.
So it comes from that kind of ilk. Hey, so before we get started, were you always like were you interested in weirdo things like when you were a kid? Like,
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'd go so far as to call them weirdo. No, I was always interested in sort of when I was growing up. The one show that I always harkened back to was the old Leonard Nimoy show, In Search Of.
Oh yeah.
That I kind of grew up on. And I always liked it. I thought it was a great show, and sort of, I guess this was my introduction to, you know, sort of, you know, esoterica, you know, cryptozoology, UFOs, things of that nature. I mean, I was born in 1971, so in the late 70s, early 80s. I mean, this was obviously well before internet. You know, I mean, you know, cable TV back then was only 30-some channels. So, you know, and VHS and stuff like that was still in its infancy. So, no, I always was, as a child, you know, growing up, interested. I mean, and, you know, even as a kid, I mean, you know, I was interested in, you know, the Universal horror movies with Lugosi, Boris Karloff as Frankenstein. You know, I mean, these are occult also. I mean, the vampire, the Kabbalistic golem,
right.
Mummy, you know, the Egyptian, you know, mysticism. So this always, as a kid, I was fascinated with, and I watched the In Search Of show. So, you know, it kind of rubbed off on me. It always stayed with me. And, you know, as I got older, I continued to investigate and read books about it. And, you know, it produced two books of my own, The Royal Arch and Cinema Symbolism.
Yeah, so, like, I know that you, with your Masonic work and a lot of the myths and allegories that you drag out of these movies that we're watching, I know a lot of them is, like, sort of the same story as, like, Christ, like, just kind of echoed throughout with the different motifs or whatever thrown in, like, as the sun hero, or the story of the solar hero. So
right. There's a lot in there. What you're asking me about. I mean, what you're dealing with is a lot of archetypical imagery. You know, you're dealing with the Christ allegory, the Christ story. Of course, the idea of this is a philosophical doctrine known as Neoplatonism. Where you have the pagan mysteries twined with Christianity. So, of course, you have things like the sun being equivalent to Jesus, the 12 apostles or the 12 houses of the zodiac. You know, the Virgin Mary is the constellation Virgo. Some people write this off as conspiracy. It is not. It is a very important philosophical doctrine known as Neoplatonism. The real controversy is where, you know, where it stops and where it starts. Is it just a retelling? is Christianity just a retelling of the Christian, or the pagan mysteries, or is it the people creating Christianity were just investing it? It was a real thing, but they didn't know any better, so they were just kind of basing the religion around these solar allegories. So yeah, I mean, this turns up in cinema all the time. I mean, you have, even, just real quick, even in the Third Degree, Masonic ritual, you have the Hiram Abiff legend, which is again the Osirian, mythology of the sun. Of course, this is Christianity with the, death and resurrection, the betrayal. In Masonry, you have 12 fellowcraft out looking for the body. Of course, these are the 12 apostles, the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes of, the 12 houses of the zodiac. I mean, it's all comparative religion. It's all, this sort of astrotheological motif. But then again, you'll find this carrying it forward. You will find this in modern cinema as well. Examples would be like the Superman story, where you have, the only begotten son sent down to earth to save mankind from itself. Superman uses miracles and magical powers to stop people from dying, and tries to teach humanity, how to be, moral and upright and, do the right thing. I mean, you certainly have the character, of James Cole, JC, in 12 Monkeys, 12
Right.
Monkeys, 12 Houses of the Zodiac. You have the John Coffey, again, JC, in the Green Mile, who dies for the sins of the South, and performs he also can heal people, and
Right, yeah.
resurrects the mouse and things like that. So no, you will find the entire. It's very what I describe in really all three books, because I'm throwing cinema symbolism too, and it's really when you're dealing with the Christ story and this solar mythology. It's very powerful. This is very, very powerful archetypical imagery. And this is all part of the collective unconscious. This is what Plato, the philosopher, called the theory of forms. So for it to turn up in films is not conspiratorial, nor is it really alarming. It's you just got to know what to look for.
Yeah. So do you, were you raised in a church or in a religious environment?
No, on the contrary. I wasn't raised an atheist or anything like that, and certainly I celebrated. I still do celebrate. I mean, I'm not Ebenezer Scrooge. I celebrate Christmas and things like that. I guess the only difference is now I know what it is I'm actually celebrating. And of course, the Christmas celebration is the winter solstice. Is really what it's a celebration of, just as Easter and Passover is the vernal equinox. But no, I would say I was sort of raised by my mother and father, who I would categorize as sort of non-denominational Christians, deists. They believed in a supreme being, so do I. But no, they weren't they weren't fundamentalists or literalists or anything like that. I mean, the truth be told, they kind of just, they just kind of let me go out and do my own thing and do my own investigation. And like I said, I'm certainly not an atheist. I do believe in a supreme being. But I, after, sort of, I guess when it comes to sort of the Abrahamic faiths, I mean, you do see a lot of comparative religious themes and icons turn up where it is really clear that a lot of what's going on in these religions, you can find in pre-existing pagan motifs.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's pretty irrefutable.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, ever since, like, ancient Egypt or ancient Greece, when we had, like, our first actors, putting on masks and, like, acting out these mythological kind of roles, it's kind of like we're still fucking doing that, right? Like, that's still, like, kind of what a lot of these movies that you're talking about is doing, right?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I mean, in many a case, in many a case, you're dealing with these ancient mythological themes just rebranded and renamed with different characters. I mean, absolutely. I mean, you look at, for example, look at the first three Star Wars movies with Luke Skywalker. Compare that with Harry Potter, or Lord of the Rings, or the Matrix trilogy. I mean, it's really the same. I mean, if you just boil it down, it's this idea of this common, ordinary, average person being plucked from the general populace to go on this messianic quest against the Dark Lord.
Yeah, it's like the.
That's the in a nutshell. I mean, that is those stories in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's like just a version of Joe Campbell's hero's journey, and it's like you.
Right.
And you could look at like Wizard of Oz, is this exact same story, except instead of a small farm boy from Tatooine. It's, like this girl from Oklahoma or Kansas or wherever. But it's like, she's got her own Wookiee, she's got her own droid, and instead of Darth Vader, it's the Wicked Witch of the West.
This is somewhat true, but you got to be a little cautious with this because Dorothy Gale is not sort of like a savior figure. She's the difference between her and people like Luke Skywalker, and they're like savior type figures battling. Right. She kind of really doesn't fit into that category. If you look hard enough, you can definitely see elements of the monomyth. The hero's journey turning up. But no, not to disagree with you too much.
Yeah.
The Wizard of Oz, without question, that's a whole chapter in the book, is overloaded with all sort of esoteric and occult themes and iconography. The guy who wrote that, L. Frank Baum, was a member of Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy Society. So it should come as no surprise that, when it comes to the Wizard of Oz, you were dealing with a lot of what I would call neo-Gnostic sort of initiation into the mystery themes that you will find in Wizard of Oz. This again, I think, is pretty irrefutable. And again, it's a whole chapter in cinema symbolism.
All right. Have you looked at The Big Lebowski?
No, I have not.
Okay. Like when I watch TV, I'm working on my books and stuff, so I'm sitting there drawing, and like The Big Lebowski's on, and the Big Lebowski Senior's droning on and on and on, and my subconscious is catching like these things he's saying, like he's bragging about this gigantic key of Pasadena that they gave him, and then like later the dude's like, does the Pope shit in the woods? And for some reason I was just like, wait a minute, this key that they're talking about is from the Hierophant card. Like they're calling the Big Lebowski a Pope, so I had to rewind the whole thing and watch it all over again. And there's like tons of tarot card symbolism in the Big Lebowski. It's crazy.
Yeah, I haven't seen. I've seen the movie, but it's been years since I watched it, and I wouldn't comment on it, not having watched it in a while. But again, when you're dealing with what I call tarot embodiment, this turns up in film. This is again again we are dealing with the philosophies and sort of the psychiatry of Carl Jung and the archetypes. This archetypal imagery is, of course, embedded upon the tarot. You've got the archetypal figures of the mother, the father, the lovers, the son, the daughter, the trickster, the villain. Absolutely. So when you're dealing with, certain movies, you will definitely find elements of what I call a tarot embodiment, where characters will embody or pursue, become living tarot cards, personifying, the archetypical qualities of these cards. Perhaps one of the greatest movies, I would say, for tarot embodiment in film is without question Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan. You have all the major, arcana. It's right there on screen. Clearly you have the Natalie Portman character who is the moon reversed. She even says it to the mother at one point, I've been to the moon and back. And of course the card reversed denotes lunacy. You have the alchemical trickster, who is Lily, who is the juggler card, who is sort of the agent of her change. You've got the self-destructive Beth McIntyre, who just wants to destroy herself, who's the tarot, who's the tower card, excuse me. The devil master manipulator is, of course, Leroy, who is the devil card. And then, of course, you have the mother, who is the sort of the cast-off, who never accomplished anything. So she's one of the lesser cards of the Arcana. She's the Queen of Swords reversed, who is sort of the bitter, sexually frustrated, sort of, mean-spirited, kind of cronish, female figure. So, yeah, take a look at Black Swan. You will definitely find a lot of tarot embodiment. And again, this is all archetypal imagery coming out of the collective unconscious.
Okay, so how do you think that we, why do they put these things in these movies? Like, is it like some kind of predictive programming, or is it some kind of ritual, or is it them just flashing like their occult gang signs at each other or us, or is it just a way to like tap in like deeper to our psychology, like as we're watching these things using like Jungian archetypes and stuff?
Yeah, I think it's intentionally done. I don't see a really dark hidden agenda behind a lot of this. I call it mythology. I've done other shows and I've been asked the same question. I call it mythology making. I believe that a lot in Hollywood, and many are somewhat coy about this, about their level of knowledge of this material. I believe this is much more popularly known in Hollywood than these guys let on to, because if you know what to look for, you'll see it over and over again. So it's kind of like training the eye to see it. But I guess, I understand why people look at this stuff with suspicion, where people believe there's sort of this dark hidden agenda behind it. I kind of really don't see it that way. The closest thing I can kind of equate this to, and I've made this comparison on other shows, is it's no different than like sacred geometry and sacred architecture, or placing sacred geometry in architecture. You walk into a Gothic cathedral, you're going to be blown away, but you kind of, with the flying buttresses and things like that,
yeah.
But you're not really sure why, but it is incorporating all these elements of like the golden ratio, Vesica Pisces, things like that. So your mind and your body is like really spiritually tapped into it. It's no different than with movies. There's archetypal imagery, mythology, Kabbalah, numerology, esoteric, astrology, archetypes. This is all part of our human condition. Movie makers know that. Is it any wonder why, like I said, and I'll just draw the comparison that I made earlier, you look at, like the Star Wars trilogy, 4, 5, and 6, you look at the Harry Potter films, you look at the Matrix movies, 1, 2, and 3, you look at Lord of the Rings movies, 1, 2, and 3. This is the same story. It's the same story told over and over again. It's just rebranded and repackaged with different names. And all these movies are blockbusters. And it's because our subconscious mind is hooked on the hero's journey, the dark evil lord, the road of trials, the meeting of the sacred feminine. This is all part of the human condition and the life experience. So to find it in movies, I don't really find it conspiratorial nor alarming. But I would say these guys know how to mess with us, and they know how to use this imagery because they're literally printing money. So, they know what they're doing. I'll put it to you like that.
Yeah. Now, when you say, like, if you know what to look for, you can see it everywhere. Like, when like, I'm looking at film or, like these high rituals, like on MTV, the movie awards or whatever, if I see, like, 2 pillars upright, like, that's a red flag for me, because I'm like, oh, there's Boaz and Jacqueline. Or if I see like a checkerboard floor, like that kind of stuff, and that's all Masonic stuff, I think. What, like, is that the kind of stuff that you mean, that if you know what to look for, you'll see it? Or
well, it's a good question, and I think kind of what you're asking me is a little bit of my methodology, and I don't mind discussing this. What I would say is, the critical thing to understanding and deciphering this is you got to understand the context of what it's being presented in. For example, a black and white checkered floor, is it Masonic? It can be, but it has to be in the context it's presented in. It could be a game of chess. Now, the game of chess does have esoteric symbolism, or alternatively, it could be just a black and white checkered floor and have no esoteric meaning. So it has to be looked at in the context of what it's being presented in. I think that's really the key for me, at any rate, to deciphering what is going on. Am I looking at like, take the black and white checkered floor. Like a perfect example. I'll just split this down a little bit. Like a perfect example of it when it's a game of chess is like in the first Harry Potter movie, the Sorcerer's Stone, when they're trying to get to the chamber or whatever it is to find the Sorcerer's Stone at the end, and they play the game of chess. Okay, then the game of chess is light versus dark, Manichaean cosmology, Zoroastrianism. Yeah. It's black versus white. So this is anticipating. This is not Masonic. This is anticipating this overarching struggle that's forthcoming in this story. With Voldemort and Harry Potter, with Potter being sort of the savior figure, the light, the good guy, the light bearer, the good guy, the force of goodness is what I'm trying to say, and then Voldemort being the force of darkness. So that's what the game of chess in that context would be symbolizing. It's not Masonic at all. You turn to the Matrix movie, where Neo goes to meet Morpheus. Now we're dealing with a Masonic aspect where he's being brought into the hotel. You have the black and white checkered floor. He climbs up the staircase. This is, of course, the ladder of ascension, the winding staircase of the middle chamber. He's being brought into the Sanctum Sanctorium to meet the Hermes Trismegistus character, Morpheus, where he's going to receive gnosis and wisdom about reality. So in that context, I would definitely say it's definitely more Masonic-like than it does have to do with a game of chess. And I would definitely say it's not coincidental at that point in time. Another great example of this where it's Masonic, And again, the Matrix movie was something I talked about in Cinema Symbolism. I've actually written Cinema Symbolism too. It's actually, I'm editing it right now. But again, if you want to see this as the checkerboard as a Masonic symbol, you're going to want to turn to the video from the early 1990s. There was Gloria Estefan. It's called "Live for Loving You."
Okay.
And the entire opening of that video is Freemasonic. I mean, the director must have been a Freemason. I mean, you got the sun rising over the black and white checker floor, which is the threshing floor of Ornan the Jesuit. You have the two pine trees as the two pillars of Enoch. You have the director depositing himself between the two pillars as the sacred name of God, as a living Kabbalistic word. This is all very, very Masonic. And then you have the video of Gloria actually goes through this alchemical transition where she starts off as this earth goddess and then transitions to the queen of the night, sitting on the full moon wearing the red dress, which symbolizes alchemical completion. This is all very esoteric, very Freemasonic, very alchemical. It's something I talk about in Cinema Symbolism too. But just to wrap up on this, the answer to your question is, I think you're looking, I mean, it's definitely you're seeing this stuff. It's just when you see it, make sure you ask yourself next, how is this being presented? What's the context? Am I with a Gnostic theme? Am I dealing with a Masonic theme? It's not easy to pick up on, believe me.
Yeah. So is this something that you do too? Like, do you pay attention to music videos? Because there's a lot of great stuff out there for music videos.
Well, like I concentrate on movies. I occasionally touch on music. I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? TV shows. I get asked about TV shows. I touch on TV shows from time to time. I really only do music videos if I'm certain of something, but by and large, I sort of back off of music videos. But I will say this, again, with music videos and the music making industry, I mean, you are, again, this of course runs completely parallel with the movie making industry. I mean, and you have, I mean, this is again something I talked about in Cinema Symbolism. I mean, with these esoteric icons and themes showing up on in movies. I mean, you have the same thing showing up in movies, in records and record cover designs and music videos. I mean, look no further than Led Zeppelin. Their fascination with Aleister Crowley.
Yeah.
Even the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's has Crowley on the cover. So yeah, this is something I'm aware of. I talk about it, but movies are probably more my bailiwick, just because I'm more familiar with them.
Right. So can you enjoy a film, or are you like constantly like breaking it down? You know what I mean? Like, can you enjoy it just as like a normal person, spectator kind of?
Yes, I can. I can enjoy it as a spectator. I cannot do an analysis esoterically of a film sitting in a movie theater. That's out of the question. I have to have the movie at my disposal. So any movie I break down is usually on Blu-ray, which I own, or I have it on demand or something, or I can watch it over and over again. To do this breakdown, it definitely requires more than one viewing. To pick up on this, in some instances, multiple viewings, and even then I've missed stuff. So it takes me, more than one viewing. And yes, I can enjoy a movie. I mean, again, not all movies are embedded with this material or this arcana. And certainly if a movie is lacking, it doesn't make it a bad movie or anything like that. I mean, I've been asked about this before. Certainly, you get into some of the films of Quentin Tarantino, maybe some archetypes, but nothing really esoteric. I just watched the movie. The one movie I really, really liked was The Witch. I mean, a great movie, but really nothing, hidden or embedded or anything like that. I mean, it drew some comparisons from a movie that came out in the 1920s called Haxan, which is all about witchcraft. Yep. And then certainly you have the Black Phillip goat, which sort of has what I would call, the goat of Mendes's je ne sais quoi, as it were. But it's a great movie anyway. But no, and you find this in Hollywood. It was on another show. I can't remember which one, and it was the two other movies from 2015 now, which were overloaded. Was of course the Star Wars, The Force Awakens, and Crimson Peak. Those really have a lot of esoteric imagery in it. But like I said, I can enjoy a movie, and not all movies have this. I mean, I don't want people like freaking out, thinking that every time they're going to watch a movie, they're being mind controlled.
Right? Yeah. No, I sometimes think it's more akin to them just like flashing their gang signs out. Like that's kind of the way that I perceive it. And like I understand what you're saying too. Like it acts like it it communicates more directly like with our psychology using like archetypes in this. But like, I know like if I do a comic book, like I'll throw some shit down, you know what I mean? Just to be like, see who can catch that, you know, see who can catch this or bring this up like in a chat or something like that.
Sure.
So, you know,
I think that's definitely part of it. I mean, no question. I have said this before on many other shows that, you know, when you get a real master, I mean, a real craftsman, you know, like a Stanley Kubrick, you know, or a Darren Aronofsky, or even a Robert Zemeckis, you know, when you watch some of their films, it really is like playing a game of chess against like Bobby Fischer,
right.
You know, where it's like a challenge. You know, they're challenging you to try to find this stuff, and I think to me personally, it adds enjoyment to the film to try to decode some of this stuff. And again, this is something that this is one of my motivations for writing this stuff, was I was seeing this stuff and I'm watching it and, you know, I'm like, you know, you got to be shitting me. Are you kidding me? I mean, am I seeing this right? I mean, in some of this material, I mean, it's just so thinly disguised. I mean, I mean, and even to this day, I'll I've seen The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, more times than I can count.
Yeah.
And every time I watch it, I probably pick up on something new on that. And it got to the point where I didn't even want to watch it anymore because I thought to myself, if I keep watching this, the book will never end. You know, I mean, I'll be constantly adding and adding and adding, you know, and the book will never end.
Yeah.
So you know, yeah. I mean, it is. You know, you talk about doing it. I mean, I'll let you in a little secret. I've done it in the Royal Arch of Enoch. I had some codes in that. I have codes in Cinema Symbolism. I have codes in Cinema Symbolism 2. In fact, with Cinema Symbolism 2, in the introduction, I actually say for the first time that I have placed codes in my books.
Nice.
And that when you're reading them, pay attention to them.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, try to decipher them.
Yeah.
So you do it and I'm doing it. Now you see a lot of people, you know, you do it and I do it. A lot of people say, well, these two guys, John Towers and Robert Sullivan, they're in the Illuminati.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's crap. You know, it's like you said. I mean, codes are good. I mean, this is a good thing. I mean, there's nothing negative with this.
Yeah, it's just, you know, I think about like, you know, there's been a lot to be said about The Shining recently since that documentary came out.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's funny because it's like you watch it and it's like, oh, there's all this layers of stuff that I didn't even realize was in there. You know.
Yeah, with The Shining, I don't know if I'm fully ready to buy into the whole fake moon landing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that to me, I'm still not ready for that one yet.
Yeah.
But alternatively, there is a ton. What I like about Kubrick is he uses esoteric symbolism, but he doesn't repeat it. He uses it. Like, for example, in The Shining, he uses he uses repetition as an esoteric device, and he's constantly repeating that entire movie is nothing but one repetition symbol or icon or phrase after another. It is a study in repetition. And the reason he's doing that is he is literally destroying your subconscious mind with the idea that the Overlook Hotel is this temple of reincarnation, this vicious reincarnation cycle that can't be stopped. So that's why he's doing it. He uses, but then you turn to a movie like Eyes Wide Shut, where he doesn't use repetition because reincarnation is not a theme of that movie, and he uses different esoteric symbols and symbolism and themes to convey a different message. So I really like that with Kubrick, how in some movies he uses one device and in another movie he uses another device. I mean that to me is real craftsmanship.
Yeah, it's really cool, and it's the way that you describe it reminds me of I can't remember this guy's name, but he was one of these guys doing acid experiments in Canada, and he would do this thing called psychic driving, where he'd dope fry someone's brain out with acid, and then just keep repeating the same message or the same tone to them for like months at a time. It's it's called a psychic driving technique. And it's kind of like what you were just sort of explaining about the repetition part of The Shining, just the over and over again about like this reincarnation or having to redo something.
Right. Well, I mean, if you watch The Shining, the whole Shining movie is this idea of the Overlook Hotel basically being an Ouroboros, a dragon that's endlessly biting its tail and doesn't end. And it's endlessly repeating. It's just this vicious reincarnation cycle happening over and over again. And I mentioned this briefly in Cinema Symbolism, but I get into it much more in Cinema Symbolism too. In fact, it's a whole subchapter. It's a whole subsection of a chapter. It's just this whole notion of the Shining, Kubrick's The Shining being this endless I mean, it's numbers repeat. It's characters say lines back to each other. There's numbers that repeat, and it is literally just this arcane study in repetition, and it's fascinating.
It's crazy.
And it's without question intentionally done. It's all coincidence or something like that. Believe me, these guys are too skilled. They're too much. They're master craftsmen. And these, if you and I can embed stuff in books, these guys can do this in movies as well. I've never understood that as a Freemason. I'll just relate this story real quick. Within Masonry, when you get into sacred architecture and things like, Baltimore and Washington, D.C. and things like that, the counter defense to this, and this was propagated by a lot of Masons because they didn't want to go into the idea of sacred geometry because they thought it fed the conspiracy world, but it really doesn't feed it. It kind of rationalizes it, and if you explain it and you explain it rationally, you understand that yes, it's being done, but it wasn't done as this dark demonic conspiracy. It's basically a form of Christian Kabbalism, right. White magic, if you want to call it. But one of the counter defenses to this is, you have these Masonic architects literally building the nation. Benjamin Latrobe, Robert Mills, James Hoban. These are the guys who are responsible for the Baltimore Basilica, the Egyptian obelisk in Washington, the Baltimore Washington Monument, the White House. These guys are these, master architects. But when all of a sudden it comes to the Hermetic tradition and mysticism and things of that notion, these master geniuses all of a sudden become total idiots. These guys would have no knowledge of this, or they have no knowledge of this whatsoever. I mean, that is complete claptrap. I mean, it's the same thing with, you hear this occasionally with movies. Oh, Darren Aronofsky wouldn't have no knowledge of this, or that's bull crap. I mean, these guys knew exactly what they're doing. I mean, and it's there. I mean, when you pick up on it and you know what the context is and what the esoteric theme is, this stuff literally will scream off the page. In fact, I'm not going to give this away because it's symbolism too. I picked up on something in Crimson Peak that was going on, and I had never seen the movie before. I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it on Blu-ray. I have it on Blu-ray here. And when I was watching it, I picked up on this theme that was going on in this movie, and I actually stopped the movie about probably 55% way through it, and I picked up on something. I said, no, wait a minute, am I really seeing this? I'm not going to say what it is.
Yeah.
When the book comes out, I'll come back on and talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Comes out. I actually stopped the movie, and I went back to the beginning of it, and I started it up again, making notes on this other subject. I thought, am I seeing this? When I got back to where I was originally, about 55% through it, I actually knew the ending of the movie.
Oh,
I said, she's going to end this movie. They're going to end this movie with the one woman running around with a meat cleaver and this other woman running around with an oversized kitchen knife. And I knew it. I knew it because I knew what they were tapping into. I completely decoded what Guillermo del Toro was tapping into. And I actually knew the ending of the movie before I saw it.
So what's the is there, besides just additional information, is there like a different, are you coming at material differently for the sequel, or is it just like more addendums or like more movies that you get to work on?
Oh no, it's different movies. When I was writing Cinema Symbolism, some of the movies that I took on in that were like The Exorcist, the Three Omen movies, Back to the Future trilogy, the Matrix trilogy, Lord of the Rings, Wizard of Oz, the James Bond movies. When I was writing this, there were more movies that I wanted to talk about, but again, I figured, well, I got to, this book will never end. I've got to excise out some of this material, these movies, or this, the book's nearly 500 pages. This will be a 700-page book. Forget about it. So Cinema Symbolism came out, and I literally, as Cinema Symbolism was coming out, I was already working well ahead on Cinema Symbolism too. And this takes on a whole new slate of movies. Some of the movies I do revisit, but I had mentioned that in Cinema Symbolism. For example, I revisit Black Swan because there was a whole other storyline in it. The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp was a movie I briefly took on at the end of the Royal Arch of Enoch. I reanalyzed that because I have seen it subsequently, and there was much more information. But by and large, Cinema Symbolism 2 is a whole new slate of movies. I'm doing some of the Alan Moore movies. I am doing some of the films of David Lynch. I'm doing all 8 of the Harry Potter movies. I'm doing all 3 of the Chronicle of Narnia movies. I'm doing some the Western movies, some of the archetypical imagery in spaghetti westerns. That's a fascinating study. Another movie I take on is Gangs in New York, Martin Scorsese. Mm-hmm. Some very deep religious symbolism going on in that. I have another chapter on horror movies. Some of the movies that turn up in this are Suspiria, of course, The Shining, which we've been talking about, Crimson Peak, which I've hinted at. So no, it's a brand new book, and it has brand new movies.
Cool. So is this something like, are you going to be able just to do a series of this and just pump one of these out every year or so?
Well, right now, what I'm doing is Cinema Symbolism. What happened was, as Cinema Symbolism, the first one was coming out, I was starting to work on Cinema Symbolism 2, but then I also started to write my first work of fiction. What happened was Cinema Symbolism came out, and once it came out, I was working on Cinema Symbolism 2 and my first work of fiction, which is the working title is called A Pact with the Devil. And again, it's a work of fiction. It's not about me or anything. And it's complete fiction. But I was working on these 2 books. What happened was both books got to be around 60% done. And at that point in time, it was too hard to alternate between them.
Yeah.
Because you had to go back and read. So I thought, all right, let me put aside the work of fiction. This happened around February of this year. I put aside the work of fiction and just plowed through Cinema Symbolism 2. I thought, let me just knock this out and get it done. The book's done. I'm making final edits on it, and I'm going to do my best to try to submit it to the publisher by the beginning of August.
Man, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's an achievement for sure.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that. Once that's done, once that's done, then the Pact with the Devil book will be wrapped up. Like I said, it's about 60% done. Then I'm going to concentrate on getting that done. After that comes out, I've actually already started working on another book on Freemasonry, which is tentatively titled Freemasonry and the Path to Babylon. I guess once that comes out, which is probably 2 or 3 years away, then maybe I'll wrap up with Cinema Symbolism 3.
Oh, cool.
But that's sort of my slate right now.
Cool. Are you paying attention to the Marvel superhero movies?
Not really.
Okay.
I know they're really popular. I've seen pieces of them here and there, but you're asking the wrong guy.
Okay. No, I was just wondering if
Listen, I have no doubt. I am sure that they probably have esoteric imagery. When you're dealing with art, when you're dealing with the superheroes, you are dealing with a ton of archetypal imagery.
Yeah.
Especially with Batman, the Shadow Self, the Jester,
right.
The Joker, the Lilith, the Catwoman, Janus, the double-headed god of good and evil, Two-Face. So when it comes to superheroes, Superman, the Christ story, you are definitely dealing with esoteric imagery. So I'm sure the Marvel stuff has it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and Disney's involved, so that's always something to perk your ears up to. I would imagine, in my experience, anyway.
Yeah, I have in Cinema Symbolism too a whole slate of Disney movies I'm taking on. There's a lot of bad information about Walt Disney out there.
It's a lot of conflicting information.
Well, you got to really be careful of this. Let me just say this once and for all, and I've said it on other shows, and people say, he's a Mason, he's lying. Walt Disney was not a Freemason. He was not a Freemason. He was in a group, now this is true, he was in a group called D-Malay, which is a Masonic Boy Scout organization
right.
For young men. That is 100% true, but Walt Disney was not a Freemason. Anyone saying he was does not know what he's talking about, or she is talking about. But the Walt Disney material, unfortunately, some of it's dark and some of it's nebulous. But unfortunately, and I don't know why this is, but Disney gets a bit of somewhat of a bad rap because there's this belief out there that Disney is like behind like Snow White and Cinderella and Maleficent.
No, they really clean those up, actually.
Well, yeah. These are all pre-existing fairy tales that date back to the Middle Ages. Some of them well beyond that.
Yeah.
All Walt Disney did was turn them into animated cartoons. So I mean, if a person believes, Walt Disney is the inventor of Snow White, I mean, those are Grimm's fairy tales, and you're dealing with the works of Charles Perrault, the guy who codified a lot of the fairy tales. Now, Disney does have some interesting things going on with it. And this is something I talked about in my first book, The Royal Arch, where a lot of people aren't aware of, is the first, well, not the first two, because there's only two, the National Treasure movies.
Right.
They're actually put out by Walt Disney. And the first National Treasure movie is actually a Masonic ritual on the screen. It's actually the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial. So I can't give Disney a complete pass, because I do believe there is some esoteric. And then, again, with the most recent Star Wars movie, Episode 7, The Force Awakens, boy, oh boy, there is all kind of, I touch on it briefly in Cinema Symbolism too, but I'm holding off on that. There is a ton of Gnosticism and sort of reverse Christianity, loads of esoteric symbolism in Star Wars Episode 7, loads of it.
Loads. Okay, so you have a concept that I heard you talk about on another Occult of Personality, I think it was, where you called it comparative cinema, and you're talking about like meta casting, I guess, like where
I call it occult casting.
Yeah, where like.
Go ahead. I know what you're talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, can you just explain it? Because like when I think about what you were talking about, like I think of like Roots, like how they cast all like the TV moms and dads as like the slave owners and stuff, and I'm like, man, that's some fucked up shit if you think about like how they cast those people. So
yeah, it is. It is. There is something to this. Well, there's a couple things I can talk about. I'll just try to split it up. There's comparative cinema where you have a movie that is drawing like upon mythology and things like that. Where you have like the Back to, I mean, I don't want to get into this because I'd spend the rest of the half hour talking about this. But like you have the Back to the Future movies, which is comparatively the Egyptian Osirian cycle. I mean, it's a study in comparative religion. But then you also have this notion of comparative cinema, where a movie is not only drawing on these ancient motifs, but they're actually drawing on another movie. I mean, for example, I'll give you an example of this, is like in the Matrix movie, in the third Matrix movie, The Matrix Revolutions, where finally Neo and Trinity, and of course Trinity dies, makes it to Deus Ex Machina at the end, who is this giant menacing face. And it's next to impossible to get there. They have to traverse the Machine City. And of course, this whole imagery is paralleling the Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy has to, get to the wizard, which is the giant green face. Deus Ex Machina is the giant, menacing face. It's not only are the Wachowskis drawing upon Gnosticism, because the Matrix movies are by and large Gnostic. But they're not only drawing upon this ancient religion, they're also drawing upon the Wizard of Oz. So it's like a double hit. It's like a double whammy. You're getting the ancient religion, but you're also getting the Wizard of Oz. I mean, as soon as you see that giant face, the first thing that should scream into your mind is, there's the giant. This looks like the giant green face from the Wizard of Oz. That's intentionally done. That's the image they want having crossed your mind. Then you get into the notion, and this is something I thought was somewhat isolated, but it seems to be much more widespread that I'm researching this, and that is what you were talking about before, is like casting, the wholesome, sort of,
like
white,
Sandy,
really white, mother and father.
Yeah, like Sandy Duncan, the fucking slave owner,
right, as like the slave owner and things like that, where it's sort of like dualistically reversed. And you will find this where and this is what I call it occult casting, because I can't think of any other word, and that is where an actor and actress is brought into a movie sort of for the cultural valences that they bring to this role, or the cinematic luggage that they bring. The first two examples I saw of this was in the first Star Wars movie, The Phantom Menace, where you had the virgin mother of Anakin Skywalker, Shmi Skywalker. Well, the actress who portrayed her was Pernilla August. I think she's a Swedish actress. That same year, 1999, when Phantom Menace came out, believe it or not, Pernilla August played the Virgin Mary in a TV show called Mary, the Mother of Jesus. So you had this parallel going on where Pernilla August was playing the Virgin Mary, but then she was also portraying Anakin Skywalker's Virgin Mother. That was intentionally done because the Anakin Skywalker story is a Christ allegory.
Right.
So that was intentionally done. Then this is sort of what you're talking about with the TV moms and dads being cast as the slave owners, where it's sort of this Gnostic reversal, where in this was another example where in the Matrix Reloaded, this is the second movie, they cast the Wachowskis cast Anthony Zerbe as one of the defenders of Zion. He was a councilman. I think his name was Councilman something or another, Halloran or something. I can't remember.
Okay.
But there's a scene in that in the Matrix Reloaded where he's walking side by side with Neo, and he gives this whole speech about how Zion is this last bastion of humanity and has to be protected of all costs, and we've got to defend Zion and defend humanity against the machines. Well, I'm watching this. I'm watching this, and I'm thinking to myself, where in the hell have I heard this before? I've seen this before somewhere. Sure enough, it comes from the Omega Man, this 1971 movie that stars Anthony Zerbe as this character called Matthias, only the Wachowskis do the reversal, where in the Omega Man, Anthony Zerbe's character Matthias gives this long speech about how Charlton Heston is the last bastion of humanity. It has to be destroyed. We've got to kill, the Charlton Heston character, end humanity. It's all evil. Get rid of humanity. This is reversed, completely reversed in the Matrix Reloaded, where he gives the speech, only it's backwards. It's mankind has to be saved. Again, this is intentionally done. It's meant to draw on these cultural valences that these particular actors and actresses bring to these current movies from their past performances. There are other examples of this, and again, it's I don't want to give too much of this away, but I'm absolutely 100% convinced that the actress Mia Wasikowska was cast in Crimson Peak because of two movies she made beforehand. One was this art house movie called Stoker, and the other was Alice in Wonderland. I am absolutely convinced that those two movies relate to Crimson Peak. And I mean, there's some just great examples of this. Another one I talk about, I was on another radio show talking about it, so I don't mind bringing it up here. But again, it's in Cinema Symbolism. I'm assuming you saw, I'm not assuming, you saw the last Star Wars movie, Episode 7, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sitting there watching this, and at the very beginning of it, I'm watching it, and I'm seeing Max von Sydow. And I'm sitting there watching this, and of course, von Sydow has this very bit part. I mean, he's only in it for the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And this kind of stuck in my head as a splinter. And I'm watching, I'm like, why is von Sydow in this movie? He's only in it for a little bit. They could have cast any elder actor for this.
Right.
And I'm sitting there watching it, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'm thinking, my God. I mean, I'm watching, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, where else have I seen Max von Sydow in a movie, at the very beginning of a movie, stand in a desert and confront a dark evil lord?
Oh, yeah, I know what you're going to say.
And I'm thinking, this is a remake of The Exorcist. I'm watching the opening scene of The Exorcist again. That's intentionally done because what the filmmakers, what Walt Disney and J.J. Abrams are doing to your subconscious mind is investing the First Order with the demonism of Pazuzu.
Yeah.
I mean, and what they're trying to convey is, okay, this First Order group is evil. And that's exactly what is conveying to your subconscious mind by having von Sydow there in the desert confronting this dark evil lord. I mean, this is so clever and so occultish.
Yeah, it's great. I didn't even think
so
about it.
fascinating. I mean, and it just goes to show you, it's just an example of how meticulous these guys are when it comes to making these movies.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating notion. That is for sure. I was a little bit more cynical about it. I was like, well, I figure if they just cast von Sydow, then they can pass him off as the bad guy, like for all the spoiler warnings until the movie comes out or something. But I don't know, like a rehash of Ming the Merciless from that.
Yeah, I see it as The Exorcist. I definitely see it as. I mean, you're in the desert planet. You got the priest. I mean, you got he's sort of the hermit character.
Yeah.
Other Marin, who is of course the hermit. I mean, here he is confronting the dark evil lord, just like it is at the very beginning of The Exorcist. It's all but the same movie. I mean, it's the same thing. And by doing that, what they're conveying to your subconscious mind is that the First Order is evil. That's really what they're trying to convey. And I think it's masterfully done.
Yeah, Like I said, it's a fascinating notion for sure. Hey, before I let you go, can we have a little bit of fun? Can I have you break down some parts of movies for me real quick?
Yeah, assuming I've seen them.
Oh,
Sure.
yeah. There's stuff that you're going to know for sure. If you had to pick a list of like 3 of like your favorite Gnostic movies, like what would you? I know it's difficult because they're kind of in vogue. Like, do you have like a ready to go, or
of just Gnostic movies? I mean, do you want me to list my 3 favorite Gnostic movies, or like the 3 best Gnostic movies that I could think of?
Your favorite ones.
Sure. I mean, I mean, for Gnosticism, for movies that are very Gnostic and movies that I like that are Gnostic, I would definitely say number 1 on that list would be the Matrix movie, the first Matrix. I mean, if you want to see Gnosticism, it's a good movie anyway,
yeah.
But that really is Gnosticism proper. I mean, but you have your Valentinian strain in it. You have your Manichaean light versus dark strain in it. So I would say, I would definitely say that would be probably number 1. Coming in a close second for Gnosticism is probably one of my all-time favorite movies anyway, which is Fight Club. Yeah, very, very, very Gnostic rebellion against the demiurge, against materialism. You got a little bit of a Masonic, secret society incursion in that.
Yeah.
But you've got the Hermes Trismegistus, Mercury, Tyler Durden, trickster character.
Yeah, I think. I always thought that my favorite Gnostic part of Fight Club, is the when he gives them the chemical burn. And Tyler's telling him the story, and he's like, "You have to realize that God doesn't even fucking like you."
Oh, absolutely. Well, absolutely. It's funny you mention that because I actually bring up that dialogue in Cinema Symbolism too. Yeah, I mean it's a full blown rebellion against the demiurge.
Yeah.
No question about it. So yeah, I would say. I mean, I totally agree with you. So I would say Fight Club would probably be number 2. Oh boy, I mean for number 3. Oof. I mean, I would probably, for Gnosticism and, I guess 3, you could tie Blade Runner maybe, or Truman Show.
Yeah,
they're both very good for Gnostic cinema. They would probably be both coming in like number 3 or 3B or something like that. So yeah, I mean, if you asked me to list probably my top favorite 3 Gnostic movies, it would probably be The Matrix, Fight Club, and then Truman Show and or Blade Runner.
Yeah, I fit Vanilla Sky and Dune in there somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. You could throw Vanilla Sky. It's been a while since I've seen it, so I'm not going to comment. Yeah, Dune is interesting because that's a Lynch. I'm taking on in Cinema Symbolism. That is one of the best examples for the Campbell monomyth, but that also has the Gnostic idea of the guy trying to bring gnosis to being the Gnostic savior. Yeah. And, no question.
And ironically, one of the most Gnostic parts in there for me is when he's going through the Gam Jabbar and his hands being burned, just like the narrator in Fight Club.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely sort of like a road of trials.
Yeah.
The bringing, the sort of putting on the pathway of gnosis. Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, the idea I guess is like experience is what gives you illumination, and
sure.
A shortcut to that would be like pain. Like it's not a smart way to do it, but it's certainly a way to do it, I think. All right, so I want to get you to bust out Monty Python's Holy Grail for me.
Oh, I don't know if we'll have time for that one, but in a nutshell. Well, I mean, we'll have time, but I'll do it as quickly as I possible.
Yeah, just the broad strokes. You don't have to
the broad stroke. Monty Python, the Holy Grail, the King Arthur legend is a solar allegory. It is, you have the figure of King Arthur as the sun. If you want to see this solar allegory, really the better movie to watch is Excalibur by John Boorman. That's a movie I took on in Royal Arch. That is really the movie to watch for the solar allegories of King Arthur. But Monty Python and the Holy Grail, I mean, you have you have King Arthur, I mean, is the sun. The next time you're watching it, take a look at Graham Chapman and Patsy's tunic. Take a look at the emblem on it if you're wondering what they are symbolizing. You have the knights, the helper knights being the round table. It's round. It's the 12 houses of the zodiac, ruled over by the sun, who is King Arthur. Of course, you have your Manichaean struggle of light versus darkness with the Dark Knight. I like the bit where you've got this whole idea King Arthur, coming out of the winter months, the sun. So of course, at the vernal equinox, the first month after the vernal equinox is Aries the ram. That's a fire sign. So who does he talk to after coming out of the winter months? Tim the enchanter. Tim, who wears the ram's horns and is fire obsessed. And then you've got the whole idea of the worship of the rabbit at the vernal equinox, the springtime, Easter festival. So of course, where does Tim take them to meet the deadly rabbit? So with the King Arthur legend, it's in Holy Grail. Probably better to see it in Excalibur, but in a broad stroke, the Arthurian legend is a solar allegory from start to finish.
Yeah, I just I loved it when I realized that what the rabbit was all about. At first, you just think it's something silly, and then you're like, oh wait. Oh yeah, it is silly, but it's also something else, Oh,
absolutely. I mean, there's loads of esoteric symbolism in that. You're doing a lot of archetypal imagery, with some of the knights. I like it how they in the Arthur legend, you have the Hermes wizard Trismegistus character, who is of course Merlin the magician. Yeah. They cut him out of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and he's replaced with this character called Sir Bedivere, who is the wise guy, who's the wisdom guy.
Yeah.
And if you want to take a look at his tunic, it's the tree, which is the Kabbalistic tree of life, which is the emanation of God, all wisdom. I thought that was very clever.
Yeah.
I mean, comedies. When I was doing cinema symbolism, I have a whole slate of films. I mean, it's not only serious movies, Gnostic movies. I mean, you will find archetypical imagery in comedies. I mean, some of them are very adroitly concealed. I mean, some of the movies that that kind of come off the page when it comes to archetypal imagery is like 9 to 5 with Dolly Parton, Lily Tomlin, Jane Fonda, Ghostbusters, which is actually a remake of 9 to 5, only they reverse it with the men. I mean, so yeah, comedies are not immune to this stuff.
Well, and when we think of Monty Python, like if you think of like Time Bandits is a great Gnostic movie. Like,
yeah, I mean, absolutely. You've got the supreme being who is your demiurge, and you have, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, look no further. This is again, someone wrote somewhere, was criticizing me. They said, oh, there's no one in Monty Python who would have been aware of this bull. I mean, Terry Gilliam has produced some very esoteric Gnostic movies. Time Bandits,
Brazil, yeah,
Monkeys. These are all movies that are overloaded with esoteric symbolism.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, I know we're creeping up on time here, so can you give us some of your links and where we can find we can find your books?
Absolutely. For starters, John, thank you for having me on. It was great, and like I said, when Cinema Symbolism 2 comes out, I look forward to returning. Or anytime
for sure.
Have me back on as a guest. I appreciate it. To find me, the easiest way is to find me online, which is my website. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV, so my website is just that. It's Robert W. Sullivan IV. It's the letter I, the letter V for the fourth.com. RobertWSullivanIV.com. From there are links to purchase the books. Both Cinema Symbolism and Royal Arch are out right now. You can get them in paperback. They're in the ebook, Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble Nook. You can buy these off of Amazon.com. You can buy them straight from my publisher. There are links there to purchase the books. Obviously, the ebooks are a lot cheaper. There are links to all my social media. There's information on my website about, television shows, radio shows I'm on and I'm going to be on. Links to my social media, links to follow me on Twitter, Facebook fan pages. There's a YouTube channel link to it where you can watch me. You can listen to some other interviews I've been on, watch some videos I produced. So just, the easiest way to do this, my website's very easy to navigate, www.robertwsullivan.iv.com.
Awesome. And Robert, thank you so much, man. You've been a dream. I appreciate it. And like I said, I'm a big fan of your work, and I just had so much fun just bullshitting with you about it. So thanks
for having me on. I look forward to coming back.
Yes, sir. All right. Thank you.
Vienna, 1683. Today is September 11th, 1683. The mighty army of the Ottoman Empire, led by the savage and radical terror troops of the Dar al-Harb, surround the walled city of Vienna and begin a siege to break the golden apple of Europe and kill, enslave, or convert all of its inhabitants. The valiant citizens stand against the tyrannical army with the steadfast leadership of Count Ernst Rudiger von Stromberg, the help of the ever-living rebel, Cyrus, the Dead Guy, and the hopes of the faraway King Jan Sobieski III and his army of flying hussars. The Vienna 1683 comic is available right now from Stigmata Studios at stigmatastudios.com and on indieplanet.us. The Non-Standard Squad, 1944. World War II. 3 weird American soldiers are on a search and rescue mission into the oldest and darkest regions of Europe. A cursed ever-living warrior, Cyrus the Dead Guy. An experimental warbot, Sergeant Lane McCord. An all-red axe, mysterious rogue with a demon-possessed arm come face to face with an army of magically corrupted machine-obsessed elves, a magic hammer-wielding Norse Ubermensch, and a Nazi wizard who is a member of the ancient Dark Order of the Shining Hexagon. The Non-Standard Squad 1944 comic is available right now from Stigmata Studios at stigmatastudios.com and on indieplanet.us.